Well, you're looking at collard greens, and I'm slow cooking them in an appropriately high Ohio State crock pot. And if you've never had collard greens, they're kind of like turnip greens, mustard greens, this kind of thing. But they're common. It's a common dish in the South. By the way, if you hear that rattling around, that's my dog in the background. As I say, I think I was making these collard greens without thinking about you, my students, but it occurred to me that you might be interested in them because this is what slaves fed themselves when they had the opportunity to get something besides what the slave owners um, had them eat. So, well, why would you want to eat these leaves? For one thing, all by themselves, they don't taste that great. And for another, in a whole pound of these leaves is only 148 calories. Well, they taste a lot better when they're flavored with this. This is a ham hock. And a ham hock is basically, once upon a time, a ham hock was one of the parts of a hog that you didn't really care about. It's really not a great piece of meat at all, which is why an enslaved person could get a hold of it because the slave owner would be very unlikely to want it. Um, I checked, and this ham hock has 167 calories in it. Now, what I've taken this out just temporarily for you to see it because where this ham hock spends most of its time, and I think I'm going to put it back while I'm on camera here, is it goes back in with the collard greens. And there's about four other ham hocks, but there are four other ham hocks swimming around down there, three others, so a total of four, okay? And now what you're looking at is, if I were to take this out, I was to serve a pound of collards greens to you, and the ham hock, one ham hock, that would be 315 calories, and you wouldn't be eating the ham hock. It doesn't have a lot of meat, but it's got fat, and that's where the calories come from. So this is what enslaved people did for themselves. And the thing about this meal, it's from their standpoint, is it tastes good and it's filling. It's particularly filling. That's what those leaves basically accomplish. So, and white people, like my family, I'm from North Carolina originally. At some point, got a hold of these guys. What are you guys eating? And got a hold of this collard greens, and ham hocks and this kind of thing. And I'm telling you, that's all that's in this. Okay, and let me show you where I got the recipe from. It's Craig Claiborne's Southern Cooking. Now, Craig Claiborne used to be the food critic for the New York Times. Okay, and that's just how good this recipe is and how Southern it is. And like a lot of things that are Southern, it's really the product of African Americans, particularly enslaved African Americans, who managed to create, not just to survive, but this way, they managed not just to survive in slavery, but they managed to carve out a life for themselves. Now you can overplay that, and some people they almost make it sound like being enslaved is like some kind of form of self-realization. But it's astonishing the way in which enslaved persons were able to retain memories of their culture, their folk ways, to carry those down from one generation to another to provide help to one another. They often didn't have their biological families anymore, but they had the other enslaved persons, and so you would create what was called fictive kin, fictional relatives, and so you would have someone who was like your uncle. You would have someone who was like your grandmother, and then there were people who had other kinds of roles. There were some people, that were religious and functioned as preachers. Obviously, they weren't allowed to preach. A lot of times, they couldn't read or write. They weren't allowed to, but they would preach. You had all kinds of people playing all kinds of roles within these slave communities. And again, it was a rugged existence. I do not want to soften it at all, one little bit. But it is a remarkable inheritance that we as Americans have. I really dislike the idea that that whites get to own some memories, and of triumph over adversity, and blacks get to own some memories of triumph over adversity. We're all Americans, and if we would only let ourselves see it this way, we can all take pride in the heritage and the ingenuity, the resourcefulness shown by what we're looking at here in this seemingly nondescript vat of green leaves.